Okay, great. Thanks, Faith, for having me again. And thanks all for joining. Let me just start by sharing my screen. Go. You should all see my screen. Just let me know
Yes.
when you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool. So, yeah, thanks all for joining this exciting time to talk about something that we dubbed visual calculations, indeed. So let me just wind back for like a couple seconds. We officially talked about this publicly last week, so that's why I'm now finally ready to talk to you all about this. If you have seen it on social media, we made a lot of announcements last week at MPPC, so the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Las Vegas. That's also where we unveiled what we're going to talk about today. So if you want to keep up to date or see whatever is happening there and what we announced there, I would encourage you to go search on your social media, your favorite social media, for people that were there at MPPC. That's probably the name they gave it or the hashtag they used to find all the latest and greatest announcement that we make there. I'm not going to cover all of those announcements today, but we're going to focus on just one, which is called Visual Calculations, which is something that has been in the pipe for like 2.5 years now. We've been working on that day in, day out almost, to try make DAX easier. I mean, we should just recognize that DAX is hard to do. We came up with a solution, hopefully, that will make DAX easier, and hopefully we'll all agree after the session that that's a good solution. If not, I'm happy to learn from you all what we did wrong and how we can improve. Before I get started, I want to say this is preview content. So anything I'm going to share is subject to change. We might change our mind between now and when you can actually play with this. When I say change our mind, doesn't mean we're going to take this away. This is coming. It is absolutely coming. However, little details about what is coming might change. Like I might promise you some certain small, like an argument to some certain function or a way that a function actually behaves or the name of the function, and between now and when you can actually play with this, that might change. So I'm keeping some kind of leeway for myself to change my mind. Again, that is the content details. The big picture is not going to change between here and the moment you can actually play with it. Please use the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions, concerns. I'll try to monitor the chat and answer any questions as we go. I can also take more questions at the end. Okay, so with that out of the way, you might know me as Jay. I'm on the Power BI product team. You might have seen me somewhere online or on social media before. Feel free to reach out at any point now or in the future if you need some help or have any questions. I'm always happy to chat and always happy to talk. I'm a product manager on the Power BI team, so that basically means that I try to figure out the what and the why of our features, define what those features should be doing, and then I hand it off to people that actually know what they're doing, and they are the software engineers and the architects, and they implement the how, so how the feature is going to work technically. So that's my work, and I focus mostly on DAX these days. So whenever you saw something that happened to the DAX world recently, any function that were added, like in December, we launched the window functions that probably caused quite a few head scratches for you all. Like, why are they even doing offset and index and window? What's happening here? Why are they investing in this? Hopefully, by the end of this talk, you'll know why we invested in that. I just basically showed you the Lego pieces of the house that I was building, but I didn't tell you about the house that I was building because I was not allowed to. So all of that work is my work, and I'm not going to say it's only me, it's the whole team, but I carry the end responsibility, at least publicly, for that. So with that, let's dive into the topic for today. So let's let's see with maybe a virtual raise of hands or a +1 in the chat. Who here has ever struggled with DAX or is even still struggling with DAX? Who thinks DAX is hard? Like people, if you're here, you probably feel that way, or not. That's fine as well. But we hear it time and time and time again. If we look at the top 5 blockers for Power BI adoption, DAX is hard is continuously in the top 3. It has been there since day one of Power BI. It still is there. That's a problem. And to many extents, it's amazing how far we got with Power BI in the position it has in the market. If its core programming language in which you do calculations is perceived as so hard, it's a testament to the quality of the rest of the product if that programming language is really that hard. Now, of course, there's hard and hard, right? I mean, yes, basic things like a sum and other things are simple to do. And of course, you can wrap your head around it. And of course, you can go read the books and go do the courses and all the good stuff. And of course, DAX becomes easier once you have a good data model. And of course, you can try to avoid calculate to make life easier on you. Yes, but many of us don't have the time, don't have the energy, don't have the money, don't have the bandwidth to go through all of that. And then it's still really amazing that we got this far in our leadership position in the market with this product when a big part of our customers perceive that core building block of our product as hard. So thanks for raising your hand. You can lower your hand now, otherwise I might think you still have questions. So yeah, if you raise your hand in reaction to this slide, please lower your hand. Thank you. So then after everybody lowered their hand, we can go back and see if there's any people with questions. So please lower your hand if you just raised your hand for this slide. Cool. So let's face it. How do people write DAX today? Many of us do like this. You know, you copy, you paste, and you cross your fingers. It's like hope for the best, right? Copy paste might be from somewhere online, might be some social media, might be some blog, might be whatever, might be a book. I mean, we've probably all, I mean, I have them within hand's reach, right? You've probably read one or two of these, or both, or even the earlier editions or whatever. I mean, you've read all of this. That's how you write your DAX, right? Isn't that interesting? I mean, this is the reality, right? But it's interesting that we got this far and that we're still here. So we need to try to improve the situation. I mean, this is not going to go away. There will always be situations where you need some help, and that's fine. And that's what the community is for, right? Our community website is great for that. It's awesome. And I'm very grateful to anybody out there, super users, whoever, community members helping out there, MVPs, anybody. So I'm not saying this should all go away. However, it seems like that this is more of the rule than the exception, right? And ideally, I want to make this the exception. Like sometimes you will need help, but ideally, I want to improve the situation for most of us, that we go like, hey, the majority of the work that I need to do in DAX when I have to write a calculation in Power BI, I can do on my own. And then, yes, of course, I need some help at some point. That's fine. That's where the community jumps in. But the reality today seems to be you always need help. And then, you know, there's only a small sliver of like calculations you feel comfortable doing on your own. To just give you an example, have you ever tried to do a running total or running sum in DAX? And if you tried, you've probably tried the first time on your own and failed miserably, like I have at least. And then you start searching online, and one of the first things you find is a website that tells you how to do a running total in DAX. This website lists 21 steps. Let that sink in. 21. For a running sum, which is something that anybody with basic knowledge of maths understand. You can do this in Excel using drag and drop. Anybody can just write this down on a piece of paper. It's not rocket science. It's just a sum, a running sum. 21 steps? That is 20 steps too many. It should just be one step. Why is this so hard? So here's where we get started, right? This is the core premise, is why is DAX so hard? What can we do to make it easier? Okay, so let's figure out what we want to do. So let's face it, what's the problem that we're on, right? So DAX is hard. Well, DAX in itself is not hard. The language DAX is not hard to read. I mean, it's pretty descriptive. It doesn't have, I see Heinrich talking about MDX. It doesn't have the square brackets and the curly brackets problem that MDX had, where you never knew which one to use when. It doesn't have that problem for most of the time, at least, most often. But the problem with DAX is not per se the characters or the way the language actually works. It's more about the arena around DAX, like how DAX gets executed when it's being executed inside of the model. Because there's a concept called filter context that exists in a model, and that is what makes DAX hard. There's also a concept called context transition, which is moving from a row to a column to a filter context. That is also really hard. So those things make it really hard. It's not about the actual language. The language itself looks a lot like Excel formulas. And that's also why people think like, oh, I can do this. And then suddenly they notice that, oh, wait, there's something else here. And that's because everything you write in DAX, especially when you focus on measures, is being executed in the context of the model. So if you have a measure on a sales table, let's say, and there's a couple dimensions around that sales table, how the user selects the filters using those dimension tables impacts how the measure is being executed, impacts and defines the context in which the measure is being executed. Therefore, if you want to make sure you always return a valid value or the right value, you have to be almost defensive in writing your DAX to figure out like, oh, wait, I need to take care of all of these situations that the measure can be used. Therefore, you have to be very much on your toes when writing the DAX statement. Instead of spending time on actually doing the calculations, you're spending time on actually wrestling with the context before you can do the calculation that you're after, right? So if you wanted to do a running sum, you actually have to set up a whole lot of stuff around it to make sure the running sum actually does what you expect it to do, given the context that the user will be using it in. And that's because DAX calculations measures, mostly, are scoped to the model and independent of each other. And then typical business type calculations are surprisingly hard to do. If you wanted to do a running sum, you probably have done the top N1 trick before, which is just mental that you have to do those kind of things. So what if you could define a calculation way easier without doing that in the model, without worrying about filter context, without worrying about context transition? What if we could give you a place in the pipeline of how data comes to your screen from the source all the way onto the chart, which is right at the moment before you paint the chart onto the screen? Your measure today is executed all the way at the beginning of the pipeline when the data has been retrieved. It is on the unaggregated information. It has to do with all the large sets of data that's there. All the context transition is there. You have to worry about all the filter context is there. What if we gave you a way to perform a calculation just before the visual is painted onto your screen, where all the context transition and filter context has already happened, where the data has been aggregated? You only have to worry about exactly what you're looking at. What if we gave you that way? What if we made it easier then to write the statements that you were after, and then actually turning DAX into almost a natural language? You go like, well, I can look at this formula and I can understand what this does. And what if on top of that, we gave you a way to do all of this without typing, if you were so inclined? That would be great, right? Well, that's what we're here for. That is what we're planning to do with visual calculations, or visual calcs for short. Visual calcs are DAX calculations. It's not a new language. They are DAX calculations on the visual. So instead of being all the way at the beginning of the pipeline where measures live, they're all the way at the end, after the data has been aggregated, just before the visual is painted onto the screen. It can refer to fields that are on the visual. That's on purpose. It can also build on top of other visual calcs. So you can have a visual calc on top of a visual calc. You can only refer to fields that are on the visual, and that's on purpose because we want to make it simple. So you'll see very quickly when I do a demo, there's no table reference because there's no concept of a table in visual calcs. You just work with whatever is on the visual. Need something from the model, add it to the visual. I'll show you in just a couple seconds what I mean with that. And then you can also refer to the visual structure, because now suddenly we're defining a calculation inside of the visual, let's say a bar chart. We can now do stuff with saying, hey, whatever's on the y-axis or whatever's on the x-axis, I want to do a calculation with that. I don't care if that's country or region or color or whatever. somebody's last name, I want to do a calculation with whatever is here on the axis, which is a concept that measures don't have, because inherently measures are all the way at the beginning of the pipeline and outside of the visual context. So you're not inside of this visual thing. And then most of the time, you don't have to worry about complexity of filter context. Now, I would want to say all of the time, but there will be situations in which you are doing very advanced things that you might have to worry about it. Okay, so what are visual calculations? They are Wysiwyg. What you see is what you get. I'll show you that in a second. You can use point and click if you want. You can also still type, and you will use whatever is just there inside of the visual. And then we'll also have a couple nifty tricks, specific functions that will make your life easier. Now, you might sit here and go like, well, wait, but we already had measures. We already had calc columns. Now you're introducing a third one. So this is a very old slide. I should update the icon, because the icon for Visual Calc is not the little eye inside of a square brackets over here. So that's my bad. I forgot to update the icon with the official one. But basically, think about this. Visual calculations are the best of both worlds from calculator columns and measures. They bring together the idea of doing a calculator column, but then on aggregated data inside the scope of a visual. The going forward path after Visual Calc has shipped to GA, my expectation is that we'll see people mostly using Visual Calcs, and then only use calculator columns and only use measures when it makes sense and when it's necessary. Visual Calcs will perform better than measures, full stop. Why? Because they run on the aggregated data. If I want to do a running sum over sales over the last 5 years, what do I need? I need 5 years, 5 numbers of sales for each year. So effectively 5 rows, 2 columns, one with year names, one with numbers for total sales for those years. That's all I need. 10 cells, 2 columns, 5 rows, to be able to run a running total over. There's no need at this point to do a running total to go back to all the millions of sales records that might be sitting there that summed up to this one number for each year. You only need the total, the aggregated data. That's what you need to do the running total. So then, because Visual Calcs only run on that aggregated level of data, we can all safely assume that whatever complicated calculation you have in mind, the AS engine, the DAX engine, will be able to handle that on that limited amount of data. Even if it's 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 rows in your visual, you will still get blazing fast performance compared to a measure that always has to go back to all the detail level data. Now, there's situations in which you need the detail level data. That's not where Visual Calc live. You could go to measures for that. I'm not taking away measures from you. I'm not taking away calc columns for you. I'm just giving you more tools in the toolbox, but also telling you that our expectation is that Visual Calcs are going to be the way forward. Okay, so now the mental model I want you to have before we jump into the demo. The mental model that we came up with is saying any visual on the screen, whether or not it's a simple line chart or a bar chart or a scatter plot or small multiples or a map or some custom visual, doesn't matter. Any of those can always be represented as a matrix. You can always convert that thing into a matrix without losing any of the data. Now, if we agree on that, then we can show you a screen in which we can show you the visual that you're working on, and then what we call the visual matrix, the matrix representation of that same visual in the same screen. So then we get to a Wysiwyg information and a Wysiwyg experience, because then a visual calculation is nothing more than adding a column onto that visual matrix. So we'll, as you see here in the mockup, we'll have a visual at the top. It has 2 numbers, sales amount and cost, for 3 categories, 3 years, right? So the visual matrix will represent 3 columns and 3 rows, 1 for year, 1 for sales amount, and 1 for cost. And then visual calculations allows you to add columns onto the visual matrix using a formula bar or point and click. And then, wait, what does that mean? Well, that means that you add new columns, new numbers to that visual matrix, which can show in the visual. But you don't have to show everything in the visual. You might have 20 columns on the visual matrix, but only show 1 number in the visual. And that's on purpose. So we also have a concept called hidden, which basically means it's on the visual matrix, but not in the visual. I'll show you that in a second. And then you can refer to any field on the visual or a visual calc that's on the visual. So therefore, you can build your solution slowly using very simple expressions, combine all of them slowly into that one thing that you were after, and only show the end result. Okay, so with that, let's just go look at a demo and see where we are today. Now, what I'm going to show you is today in the product, not in the version that you have. It is actually going to be in desktop, and I'm not showing you any fake. I'm not showing you any mock-ups. This is actually today in the product. You won't be able to play with it just yet. We'll get to that in a second. We can talk about when. But I'm not showing you any fakery here. This is actually in the product. That's also caveating that it might break, because I'm doing a live demo. This is pre-release software. It might just break. It might just blow up in my face, but that's also the fun of it, right? Now, there will also be pieces missing because this is our current state today. There's large parts of stuff that are still coming, and we can also talk about those. So it's going to be a little bit rough around the edges. Okay, so here we are in desktop. I'm just going to put together a very simple example here. Going to do some category. Let me just do this as a bar chart. I think that makes sense. Yeah, let's just start with this. It's a very simple, basic example. We can always add more later. Okay, so nothing special here, no trickery, nothing special. But right now, I can use this and go into here. New calculation. There's a new button that you won't see. That is where Visual Calc live. You will also soon see it on this flyout menu here on the on-object window to add a new calculation, but right now it only is here. That's one of the examples of stuff that we still need to build before we're ready to ship this to you all. So I'm going to click New Calculation here, and now we are at what I just showed you in the slide. A Visual Calcs edit mode, if you will. It has the visual that I'm working on at the top. You should recognize that. There's a formula bar here, and then there's what I call the visual matrix here at the bottom. This, again, you can check my work. You can see that what is here is exactly what is in this visual, right? Is 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, well, 5 with a header, 3 columns. That is all we need to paint this visual onto your screen. There might be millions of rows beneath this. That is not necessary at this point. We just show you the visual, right? So now I can do interesting things. I can add columns to this visual to do some math. For example, and I'll start with a very basic example, is profit. I could do profit is sales amount minus total product cost. Now, of course, we could have done this in a measure, right? Sum of sales amount minus sum of total product cost. Of course, that is a great measure, and it's a bad example of a visual calc. But I'm starting with this as a very simple example just to hammer home the point. Now, what you saw here is it doesn't refer to any of the tables. It just have only the thing that it's called in the visual matrix or in the visual here, right? And that's on purpose because, again, we want to get you out of this thinking of there's multiple tables in context. I'm only working with one table here, right? This may have come from multiple tables at this point. Well, in fact, it did. Category came from product table, the other two from the fact internet sales table. At this point, it doesn't matter. It is just there, and you can work with it as what you named it, right? So if you change the name, you can also just refer to that name. So now I'm just going to add this, and now we have a new profit column. Very simple. You also notice that we now added the orange bar at the top. Well, maybe I only wanted to show profit. Well, what I can do is I can now hide sales amount and total product cost from view, and now the top visual will only show profit. You notice that the visual matrix still shows all of those fields, and that's on purpose because, again, a visual calc can only refer to what's on the visual. Well, what's on the visual? For profit, we need sales amount minus total product cost. So we need to keep those fields around, but we don't necessarily have to show them in the matrix. So a visual calc can refer to anything that's on the visual matrix, but you don't have to show everything in the visual, right? So I hope that makes sense. Now, if I wanted to add more data, I can add it to the visual by going in here from the model and add them back in. Okay, very simple example, of course, on purpose. So now let me do something more intelligent. Let's do a running sum, for example. You can type that. You can also just use a template. I'm just going to use a template here. We have multiple templates baked in. Running sum, moving average, percent of parent, percent of grand total, average of children versus previous, versus next, versus last, and versus first. I'm rattling that off really quickly, but in here are so many little gems of stuff that it was so hard to do before that is now very simple. So let's do a running sum. What do we think would be the DAX expression for running sum? Anybody want to dream up an expression that I want to use for a running sum? What would you prefer to type or to see if somebody did a running sum? Would it be maybe running sum? Could it be? Well, let's try. There we go. Just running sum. Nothing else. This is so easy. So I can just do running sum of profit. And now I'm creating a running sum of the profit field, right? The profit field is a visual calc in itself. So now I'm building a visual calc on top of a visual calc. Hit commit. And now we have a running sum. Very simple. Very, very simple. Okay. So what else? Well, we can do maybe moving average. Oh, the function name for a moving average is, you guessed it, moving average. Simple. Again, let me do a moving average of, let me just do the total product cost for now, just because you can. Specify the window size, and now we have a moving average for total product cost. Very, very simple. Okay, let's do a comparison between the categories. I want to compare my current profit versus the previous. Versus previous, that's what I'm going to use. What would be the DAX expression to retrieve the previous value? Maybe previous? Could it really be that simple? Well, let's see. I can just type it. Give it a name. Say, I'm going to take profit minus, I really want to get the previous one just above me. Maybe there's a function called previous. Oh, there we go. Previous profit. I can literally look at this and go like, yes, I understand what this does. Hit OK. And now we have a comparison versus previous. Next, you want to get the next one. Next is the function. You want to get the first one. Well, guess what the function is called? First. You want to get the last one in the list. Well, guess what the function is called? Last. It doesn't get simpler than this. It is so simple. You can just walk up to the expression and go like, yes, I understand all of this. Now, great. So I can clean up my visual a little bit, move some stuff around. I don't need profit. I wanted to show the running sum, but the rest I want to just move to tooltips. So my visual looks a little bit better. And back to the report, and you can see that I actually have now a visual that didn't exist before. And the stuff that I just put into tooltips is right there. And the stuff that's on the visual, the running sum, is also right there. So in just a couple of clicks, we created something that didn't exist before. Now I see some questions running in. I'm gonna talk to that right now. Let me just go back before I do that to my slides. So this is the point where you go onto your social media, your favorite social media, and put something on social media that is about your mind is blown, because that is the kind of excitement that I want to create with this. Is so if you could do me a favor and put something on social media about all of this and share the excitement, please feel free. So with that, I'll leave this on the screen, and I'm going to answer some of the questions. So scrolling down. Go back to MDX. No. So are there external apps or custom visuals? I'm just going to translate it, that kind of use something or do something similar as Visual Calcs. Well, they don't use Visual Calcs because that is our invention. But yes, absolutely. People like visuals like InfoRiver or kind of already provided this kind of capability, right? So are Visual Calcs only for numerical values? Well, no, you can also just take the first of a character and say, you know, A, B, C, or whatever. You don't need to do Visual Calcs to do only calculated numerical values. So for example, you could say, hey, all product categories that start with A, I want to do something with that, right? So you could write a Visual Calc that takes the first character of a product category, and that could just be a string value. So you're not limited to numerical values. So UV saying Excel colleagues are going to love it. Well, that's exactly what we're after. We're trying to make it easier, give them a warm bath for people that are onboarding onto Power BI and DAX, make that easier for them. What about order when creating and running sum based on categories? Does that change if you change the sort order on categories? So that's a great question. I'm going to go back to my demo for that one. So if I'm now in here and I'm going to change my sort order to say I'm going to switch category around, now the sort order has changed. And also the Visual Calc has changed. So by default, your Visual Calc will respond to the sort order. Now, if you didn't want that, we have an escape for you, because Visual Calcs are built on top of what we call window functions. Those window functions, we already showed you the building blocks. You can always write the equivalent in a window function and use order by to fix the ordering to a certain way, right? So Visual Calcs will, by default, right now, respond to the sort order. But if you didn't want it, if you wanted to sort it, to force the running sum to always go by category A to Z, you can just write that using order by category ascending, and then you would have fixed it to that sort order, and it wouldn't change with the visual. Your Visual Calc by default will. So if you want to do that, write a window function, which you can absolutely do in a Visual Calc or in a measure, by the way. So what would be the granularity at which we can define a running calculation? For example, if we had a hierarchy. Great question, George. I'm going to show you that now. Let me go back in. So here we are. I'm just going to get rid of some of this stuff because it's kind of confusing. So I'm just going to clean up some of the mess here. So we still have only profit there. And I'm going to add maybe year. So I don't know, not here. Whoops, my bad. Fiscal year. Okay, so now we have fiscal year and we have category, right? So now if I wanted to do an average, let's say an average of children. Well, what I can do is I can just use either the template or just, specify a title myself. So literally, I'm going to do an average of profit on the rows axes. Now, I haven't talked about axes yet. I'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, what is happening here is we're saying for each level, so fiscal year being the top level, category being the next level, take the average of profit in rows. Rows is the vertical direction. I'll show you that in a second. Expanding, which basically means adding more detail. So here, you are defining the calculation on the detail level. However, when we get to the subtotal level, we're now adding detail to add in the children. So when we get to the subtotal for this calculation for fiscal year 2018, what it's going to do is, for just the execution of that calculation, expand the context to include these 4 cells, and those will then be averaged. So now we have a way to define this subtotal, right? So I can now expand on rows, and therefore this should return me the average of children. Now, of course, the average of yourself, if you don't have any children, is just yourself, right? So that's what you see in the detail level. But on the higher level, the grand total, and also on the subtotal level, you will see now there is now a different behavior, right? It's the average of the children that I just defined. Very, very simple. We also have the reverse. We have a collapse, which is actually removing details, so moving up in the stack. If you wanted to calculate the percentage of profit that my category has in the fiscal year, I can do a collapse, or I can also do a collapse all to go to the grand total, or reversely expand all to get to the lowest level from wherever I am. So this is all the great stuff that we have there with expand and collapse. So just going back to this chat now. So I think UV already answered that question. So are visual calcs part of the semantic layer? I'm not sure if I understand what you mean there. They are not in the report. Sorry, they are not in the model. They are in the report. So I'm not sure that's the right thing. Can you use this with a live connection? Yes, you can. Can you reuse visual calcs in other visuals? Yes, you can. You will be able to copy paste these visual calcs onto other visuals. Now, if you have something, if the profit is dependent on something that is not on the other visual, just bring on the other fields for you. We'll bring them over in the hidden state to not destroy your visualization, but your visual calc will continue to work. So of course RLS is respective of visual calcs because RLS is lower in the stack, so that's already done. Does that formula bar support full DAX? Yes, this is normal DAX. There's no trickery here. It's just normal regular DAX. You don't have to learn a new language. We're just giving you more things to play with. So now George finally understands why we got the window functions, because I showed you the building blocks. I showed you the Lego bricks, but I never told you what kind of house I was building. Now I'm showing you what kind of house I was building, because under the covers, all of this is done using those window functions that we showed. So now we get to the core question here. When will this be available for everyone? And I'm just going to answer it right now. If you go into our public roadmap, you'll see this is listed for March 2024. This is not vaporware. I'm not pulling your leg. I'm not showing you mockups. I'm not showing you any fakery. This is coming in March 2024, maybe a little bit earlier. So by then you will be ready. You know this is coming and you are ready to hit the ground running. I'm not joking. We're not pulling this away. We're not hiding this. We're not taking this another year or whatever. This is coming early next year. So anybody saying out there, this is all fake, come talk to me, show them this recording. I told you it here. It's March 2024. Cool. So, is it also possible to use new Visual Calc DAX functions inside a regular DAX query? That's a great question, Chris. No, it's not. So you will be able to use window functions. Window, offset, index, yes. But these specific ones, running sum, collapse, expand, moving average, first, last, previous, you cannot use them in measures. You can only use them in visual calcs. Why? Because they are built on the notion of knowing where in the visual they are. And that concept doesn't exist in measures or calculated columns because they're outside of a visual. Hence, you will not be able to use these functions outside of visual calcs. So let's see. Are you looking into adding rows to tables also in the future? Yes, absolutely. We're looking at that. That might come, but not right now. Right now, it's just columns. Will this be some kind of mixed language between Excel, DAX, and MDX? Well, hopefully not MDX, because I'm not planning to bring that back anytime soon. Let's try to keep that one buried. However, let's remember ourselves that DAX originated from Excel formulas. We're now saying DAX has grown, but we're trying to add more sugar syntax to make DAX easier. So in some ways, we're seeing a resurgence of Excel formulas and moving slightly closer to Excel formulas. So with that, will this be supported for any visual available in Power BI? Yes, it will be provided to any visual. Custom visuals can use this. A custom visual developer might have to do some new work to support it in the right way in their visual, but there's nothing stopping them from doing that. We will just support this for any visual that's out there. Script visuals, custom visuals, all visuals that we built in, we are planning to support. Cool. So with that, let me go back to my slides. So what are visual calcs? Visual calculations in scope of a visual. And in support of that, we have a couple new concepts and a couple new functions. So first off, these are just DAX expressions. There's no new language that we're inventing here. It's just DAX. Most DAX that you use today will work. For example, here's an order category. Again, somebody asked about, can this only be numerical values? Well, no, you can definitely do this. This is just regular DAX that works in a calc column, will work in a visual calc. There's a couple of things that you can't do. That has to do because we put you in a little sandbox. So in the sandbox, there's no concept of another table. So use relationship is not something you can use because that whole concept of walking a relationship doesn't exist inside of this little sandbox. So that's why this slide says most DAX work. Then basic arithmetic, of course, works, and then we'll have new visual calcs functions. So for example, to show you the current solution and the new solution, here's the current, current way of doing a running sum, implement a running sum calculation that sums sales amount over year. Relatively simple. This is what you would have to do. In visual calcs, you would have to just write running sum sales amount and you're done. Let's say give a list of states and number of restaurants per state. For each state, calculate the difference in number of restaurants in that state versus the one above. On the left is the current DAX that you need with a top N1 trick. On the right, using a window function, this is what you need. And this even becomes easier by just saying number of restaurants minus previous number of restaurants. So it's just that simple. We get from like 20 line of DAX to 6 with window functions and now down to 1 with Visual Calcs. So what are we introducing? We're introducing multiple new functions divided in levels. Some of them you already heard of. Low, medium, and high level functions. So low level functions are also called window functions. We've already shipped these to you. Offset, index, window, rank, and row number. You already heard about this. You saw it in December. You might have been thinking, well, what are those people doing over there? Why are they investing in this area? Well, hopefully now it clicks for you and you go like, oh, now I understand why you needed all of this. Because under the covers, the other stuff that we're shipping to you, which I'll show you in the next 2 slides, are just shortcuts to these functions. So you can absolutely express Visual Calcs in these functions, but you don't have to just make them easier. Then, of course, these functions come together with order by, partition by, and match by for the full power and flexibility. Now, on top of that, we have medium level functions. Previous, next, first, last, all movements. So previous will move up or to the left in a relative movement. Next will do the same but down and to the right. First and last are absolute movements up or left or down to the right, depending on the direction. We'll talk about direction in just a sec. Range is a shortcut to window. And then expand all, collapse all we just talked about. And then lookup is H lookup, X lookup, V lookup, whatever you want to call it in Excel. That thing is just what lookup is going to do. So basically say for year 2022 and color equals green, I want to get the sales amount. Where that is true, I want to get that number. And is at level allows you to do more advanced stuff because it allows you to define in which level I am, so you can do stuff on subtotals and custom totals as one. Then on top of that, we'll have 2 new high-level functions called running sum and moving average. I already showed you both. Cool. So I'm just gonna take some more questions over here. Let's see, are we still going to be able to see and modify these visual calculations in Tabular Editor? That's a good question, Fernando. The answer is no, because Tabular Editor talks to the model, so you will not be able to see them there. They're in the report. Can we export the table that has Visual Calcs to Excel? UV, yes, you will be able to. And it should not happen, but of course we know reality is where people are going to do that. Will you be able to bulk export? Can somebody please go on mute if you're not talking? Thank you. Will you be able to bulk export the Visual Calc formulas for documentation? There will be an API that allows you to talk to any report or any sets of reports. It's an extension of the scanner API to export the Visual Calcs or see what Visual Calcs are defined in a report. Fahid, can I ask you to mute whoever was talking? Because it's very distracting.
I just did that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it. So what DAX would you see if you run Performance Analyzer and catch the query? Will you see the DAX generated window functions? Chris, that's a great question. We don't know yet. We will probably show you just the window, just the Visual Calc, but we might also show you the window function underneath. We have not made our mind up right now what is the right behavior. We might actually provide you both and say, hey, here's the simple version that actually expands into the biggest version, the more complicated version. We just haven't made our mind up yet, but it will be shown in the Performance Analyzer. All right, so a couple new things for you to remember. There's new concept. There's a concept called visual matrix, the matrix that represents the data. And then on top of that, you have axes, which is basically how the calculation traverses the visual matrix. Then you can reset a calculation while it's traversing over the visual matrix, which is reset. And then combining these two things together is direction. And hidden, I already showed you, is a field that is on the visual matrix, but not on the visual. So now let me just wrap up these concepts for you. So we have a concept called axes. And axes basically means in which direction is the calculation moving over the visual matrix. By default, it is rows, which basically means we traverse over the rows, which is rows are horizontal, so hence we go vertically. Okay, columns basically means we traverse over the things that are vertical, so we go horizontally, left to right. That is rows and columns. Now, you can put these two things together and do something very interesting, which would be columns rows or rows columns. That means columns rows would mean go horizontal until you reach the end of the row, remind whatever value you had here, go to the next row and keep counting with that. So that basically goes like a snake or a typewriter across your visual. Then the other one is what I call the planter movement. We go down every column. By the end of the column, we remember our value. We go to the next column, and we go like a planter, vertical snake over your visual. These two are very advanced, and I don't think many of you will ever use them, but they are there in case you need them. So to give you an example, first sales amount on rows would be for each column, retrieve the first sales amount from the first column. That is what this would do, right? So in the scope, right? So for each of the dotted lines here, I'm just going to take the pointer right here. So for each of the, whoops, that's the wrong button. Just give me a sec. So for each of these in the scope, get the first sales amount. So you can see the dotted lines and the colors matching up, right? So these would all refer to that. These would all refer to that. Very, very straightforward. First columns would be for each row. Wait, for each column, yes, retrieve the sales amount from the first column, right? So here we see the calculation always referring to the first value that is for the first year on the columns, right? So here you can see that this number doesn't change when I move to 2019 and 2020. We'll always get the sales amount for the first year, the first on columns, and the same for every other row. And then if we do something more intelligent or more advanced here, here's an example of previous with rows and columns. So for each cell, retrieve the previous sales amount from the row above it, or if you're the first cell, get the sales amount from the last cell in the previous column. Okay, so since this is rows columns, this remembers what happened between all the columns. So therefore, if we're the first row in the second column, we'll actually retrieve the value from the last cell in the previous column. If you're the first row in the third column, we'll retrieve the value from the last cell in the second column. Of course, the first cell in the first column is going to be empty because there's no previous cell. So this is what you see here. Right? This result is that one. That result is that one. That result is that one. This one is not empty because it retrieves the data from this one. Right? So that's how we snake over your matrix right there. And then to show you the other example, this is the other direction. We go, this one retrieves that one retrieves that one. This one is not empty because there is a value before in the column, in the row before us. And then this guy happily refers to the one previous in the same color, right? So that is how these two things work. Now, great. Again, these last two are very complicated. It takes some time to wrap your head around. Then the next one coming soon is reset. Reset allows you to restart the calculation while it's transferring the matrix. So if you do a running sum over time, let's say you have year and quarter, but you want the running sum to restart over every year, so not counting every year, but you want a sum within the quarter, you can now do a reset on year and say, restart whenever the year value changes. That is what reset means. Whenever the value changes of the field that I specified, I want to restart the calculation from scratch. So now you can write running sum, sales amount, comma, year, reset on year. That basically means whenever the year changes, restart my calculation from 0. So therefore, I now effectively created a running sum within the year for each quarter. That is what is coming with reset. If we combine these two things together, we get to the whoops. Wow, that was very fast. I think my PowerPoint just crashed. That was awesome. Let's just go to the last slide that I was planning to show. Just scrolling from current slide. There we go. No. It just crashed again. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to go in not in presenter mode anymore. I'm just going to show you window because why not? So the concept of direction is then combining the reset and the axes, right? So we're now showing you columns, rows, and then columns, rows, columns, and then combining those with reset. That is then how this whole thing can work and will have all the flexibility that you need. So that's direction. Hidden, we already talked about. You can hide stuff from the visual. I already showed you that, right? What is on the visual matrix doesn't have to be what is on the visual itself. And then you might sit here, and that's where I'll stop talking and take more questions, is, but what about calculate? Where's calculate in here? I haven't seen you doing anything with calculate here. Are you suddenly of the no calculate movement? No, I'm not. I'm okay with that. Whatever floats your boat is what you want to do. However, my charter here is to try to hide calculate from you, or at least to not hide it, to postpone the moment you need to work with calculate. Because calculate within itself brings a lot of complexity, right? With the context transition and all the stuff that's happening in there, it's a lot of complexity that we just need to bring in. So with us, with Visual Calcs, what we're trying to do is we're making DAX easier by saying fatten the donut. So bear with me for a second. If you think about DAX as a donut, right? A donut is a ring of dough with a hole in the middle. People walk on the ring of dough. You're fine, right? You just started. You did a running sum, or you did a sum. You did an average. You did maybe a sum x or whatever. You're all good, right? You're all happy with that. And then it's very quickly the dough runs out, and there's a hole in the middle where calculate lives. And that's where the complexity of DAX starts coming in. That's where you have to worry about context transition all of a sudden, and you go like, why did I even start in this journey? Now, I'm not saying we need to convert the donut into a pancake, aka plug the hole, get rid of calculate. That's not what I'm saying. Calculate has a lot of great uses, and you will still need to use calculate for some advanced scenarios sometimes. However, what we're trying to do here, we try to fatten the donut. We try to increase the time that you can happily walk on the dough that is the rim of the donut, instead of having to deal with all the detail and the infinite complexity that's the calculate stuff in the middle. So if you look at it through a lens, you can actually see that the higher level functions that we're introducing, like first, to give you an example, is actually a shortcut to calculate. So first, sales year will actually be wrapped into a calculate sales first year, which then will be expanded into index, because first is a shortcut to index to the same statement. So the 3 lines of DAX you see here on this slide are all exactly the same. However, the first one obviously is the most easy to write and read and the most easy to remember. Again, because we're in the context of a visual, this will work fine. That's also why first will not be available outside of the visual, because then I would have to write it into a calculate. So to handle all that stuff that brings the complexity. So hopefully that kind of explains, if you were sitting here and thinking like, but are they doing away with calculate? No, we're not. We're just conveniently hiding it from you, postponing the moment you have to deal with it. Not saying you will never ever have to deal with it. You might just have to deal with it at some point. We're just postponing that time to just make it more comfortable, make it more easy for everybody who's onboarding onto Power BI and is not entirely sure what to do with DAX yet, to just make it easier for them for longer. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna go and answer some more questions. Let me just see. If you have a burning question, also feel free to raise your hand. Let's see. Question. Are you telling us that the report layer will be opened up to querying without having to be in desktop? Stephen, that is not what I think I said, nor did imply. So I'm not sure what you mean here, but that is not what I meant. We're in the visuals live in a report layer. In the report itself, we define the calculations because they're on the visual. That's what I meant to say. If that wasn't clear, I hope that clarifies. But if you have further questions, please raise your hand. I'm going to make the Italians redo some of the videos. Well, many of them, and they are already aware. They know this is coming, as somebody already said. Are you making your slide deck available? Yes, I am. I will upload the PDF a little later. That's all good. You already mentioned that Visual Calcs can be reused and sent the same report. It's also possible to use Visual Calcs across reports. Well, you can just copy paste them. You can just bring them over to another visual and another report. However, they will need the fields that you refer to. So if that Visual Calcs refers to sales amount and total product cost, it will not work if those fields don't exist in the other model, right? So in the same report, that's already a problem. If that visual doesn't have sales amount and total product cost, we'll need to add them. So that's okay, we can do that. However, if you paste that visual calc into a report that doesn't have a field called sales and doesn't have a field called total product cost on the same table that those fields refer to, that visual calc will break. Will not delete it or whatever. It will just be there, but in an error state, and then you would have to rewire it to the right field. So at least you can keep the same logic. Are you making the slide deck available? Says confidential on the top. Does it? I don't think it does anywhere. Oh, here. Yeah, it does, but that's okay. So yes, I'm going to share my slides because when I export to PDF, that confidential line is gone. So unless it's somewhere else, but I don't think that any of this is confidential. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shown it to you. Will those visual calculations not introduce also some complexity in model documentation, e.g. not putting some comments? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. You can absolutely have comments in Visual Calcs. It is multi-line. I haven't shown you yet because I didn't need it, but you can absolutely have like 20 line of Visual Calcs in there. It's all fine. Does it also work in Power BI Service? Yes. Will it be available to all licensed versions? Yes. So that's his question. If you want, can you convert your Visual Calc to the low-level function like calculate? Yes, you will be able to promote a Visual Calc to a measure eventually. We'll then do our best to convert, for example, the running sum into a call to window. There's zero guarantee we'll be able to convert everything, but we'll give it our best shot. And then that way you will be able to see the low-level function as well. So that's what we're planning to do. Can you confirm this is only for Power BI visuals, not in the data model, so it doesn't have any impact on analyzing Excel? That is correct. So Brian gives us the blessing and he says it makes total sense. I'm glad to hear that. Is there potential for report consumers to add their own visual calcs on the visual rather than Office having this control? Yes, good point. We're planning to allow report consumers to personalize visuals. So they will need to be allowed by the report author to personalize the visual. But once they have that personalization right, so the author has to enable it on the visual, then they can add visual calcs on their own in a personalized version of that visual. Therefore, we think it's a good balance between the report author having all the control and the user having the flexibility without the risk of this becoming a thing on its own and you ending up in debates like, oh, but I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that version, right? We don't want that. There is one version. That's what the report author create. On top of that, you can do personalizations, but it's still tied to that version. So using personalized visuals, today you can already change what a visual looks like. You'll also be able to edit, add, delete any new calcs on top of that in your personalized version. I can see the visual calcs are redundantly used if you want to use profit across several visuals. Will you have a report layer calc that can be reused? No, we won't. That is on purpose. Right now, we are not planning to build that because the benefits of having a non-report layer calc is because it's very, very simple to build all this. And now it's very, very simple to edit and create and update. Yes, of course, it's annoying if my profit calcs changes. Honestly, I would expect your actual business logic to still live in a measure, and then you're just using a visual calc to wrestle it into the right place for a visual. We're also thinking about giving you a screen where you can see all the visual calc in a file and just make it easy to do bulk edits. But we have made a clear choice that we will not have a thing in the middle somewhere that people have to wrap their head around. We're going for simplicity here. So that is what we're planning to do. So leading up to the March release, do you have a channel where training and examples and walkthrough will take place? Right now, no. We're only releasing our documentation when the feature ships. And so that will come in March. We're ramping all of that up. We're building that slowly, but we are not releasing that right now. It will probably be very close to March, if not just exactly on March. But of course, like people that have already seen it will start sharing little tidbits over and over on the web. There's already a couple blogs out there that give you more insight into this as well. So you don't have to only get it from my side. On the Power BI service, can end users choose to hide certain visual calcs on the fly and save as a personal bookmark? Yes, that's what I meant with personalization, right? You can absolutely do that. Will visual calcs be in a new query editor? No, absolutely not. Because the query editor is model, it's not the report layer. So the DAX query editor will be in the model, not the report layer. If you want to have one version of the truth regarding business logic, the golden data set, do I understand correctly that Visual Calcs can't help you in this scenario? That is correct. Visual Calcs are not built for that. You do that stuff in a measure, or better, do it as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary, to quote Mr. Roach. If we have measures for your field parameters as part of visuals, will these Visual Calcs work on top of those? Yes, they will. So just to answer that question, any idea on the length of roadmap from preview to GA? That's a great question, Stephen. That all depends on the quality that we put out and the feedback that you guys give us when we go into preview in March. To be honest, there is 100 and something page spec, functional spec. I'm not talking about technical specs, which are way longer, for just this feature alone, because what I showed you doesn't have any point and click, right? I mean, if we go into the screen here, there's no way for me to right now just click on this header or on these cells to fill in these parameters, right? So I still have to do a lot of typing, as you notice. All of that is still coming. Whether or not it will be there for March, we'll see. But we're just getting started. So what we're showing you here is about maybe the first 40 pages of that 100 and something page spec. There's more stuff coming, mostly around like usability, visualization, clicking without less typing, those kind of things. The core of how this works is ready. That's what I showed you today. So if there's functions missing, if there's templates missing, you go like, well, you missed something very important. That's always hard for me, and I cannot do that using these functions you just explained. Send me a note, send me an email, because this is the moment I can still try to add those in. That part is kind of solidified. It is now the rest of the pages is more about how can we make this easier to use, right? Do we the right highlighting? Maybe I can go into some kind of explain mode to see, okay, this number over here that is here, how did that came to be, right? Which cells did it take? Think about like Excel formulas where it has like the dotted lines around the cells to show you which cells went into calculating this number. That's something that we're also planning to add, which aren't there today. So that's basically where all the rest of our time is going to be spent on, and just general visualization, ease of use, as well as supporting more visuals. Because I'm showing you a bar chart right now. That's on purpose because loads of other visuals are not supported yet. Scatter plots are not supported yet. Those will all come. We're planning to support all of those, but that's like where we'll spend our time. So, you know, timeline-wise, from March, it might be a couple months, it might be a year. Who knows? It depends really on how fast we keep moving, how many bugs you find, how well you receive this feature, right? If you all go like, yes, this is great, give me more, then we can move forward faster. But if you go like, well, here's a bug, here's a bug, we'll have to fix those bugs before we can move faster. So really the time is in your hands to some extent. We'll also support natural language DAX support. So yes, eventually with all the Copilot things that are happening with all AI, eventually down the line, yes, of course, we want to allow you to just write an utterance, what you want. I want to do a running sum of sales over year, and we would generate the DAX for you. Right now, in March, that will not be there. It will just be the typing and potentially the clicking that I talked about. Okay, so I think I just answered all questions that are in the chat. If you have more, let me know. My shirt should say data graph Visual Calcs. It says data graph repeat, right? But yeah, I can definitely update that one. Thank you, George. Will conditional formatting also work? Yes, you will also be able to add conditional formatting on top of Visual Calcs. Yes. Will this support DQ mode with SQL Server? Yes. Why? Because it's not dependent on the source. All of these calculations happen after the data has been retrieved. So it doesn't matter if the data is SQL or Snowflake or CSV. It doesn't matter. We're not pushing these calculations down to the engine on purpose. We're doing this after all the data has been aggregated, and then we're doing the calculations. So the calculations happen on your side, not on the source. So it's independent of source. All the sources will work. Can we now in the future interact with Data Activator in these Visual Calcs? That's a great question. The answer is yes, but we'll have to figure out what that interaction is. So Will Thompson and me were talking about it. So we're trying to figure out how that interaction will be working together. So stay tuned for that one. Let's see. work on DAX tables, have a formula like add column Visual Calc. So we thought about that, Chris. To your question, can we do something with DAX tables? Right now, we're targeting a use case where people are coming from Excel. So this is an advanced scenario of working on a DAX table right now that is not in our scope. Yeah, so data activator doesn't work. I mean, we haven't figured out how these two things will work together. They will work together in some way, but we haven't figured out exactly what it's going to be. So, Faid, do we have more time? I'm happy to take a little bit more, a couple more questions.
Yeah. Yes. If anybody has any question, you can unmute yourself, just raise your hand, or just send it in the chat. I think they asked all the questions. Oh, yeah, there is one. Oh.
What's your personal favorite part of Visual Calc? That's a good question, Stephen. I think that my personal favorite is not the clicking and stuff that we're planning to do. I see myself as a typing person, so I won't rely on that too much. Others call that their favorite. I don't really. For me, it's the ease of the functions. Like literally, you can just think what the function would be called, and you can just type it, and it will probably be named that way. And the other thing that is really cool about this, the number of parameters is very limited. I had a rule, I still have a rule, maximum 4 parameters. So more than 4 is too hard. So that is what I think is my favorite part of this. It's so easy to use that you can just dream up the expression and go like, I wonder if DAX has some way to get the first item in a list. Oh, let me just try and search for first. Oh, guess what? There is a function called first, right? It's so easy. You can just look at the expression. There's no weird calculates anymore. There's nothing in here. There's no table refs. It's just very simple, clear cut. This is what it does. You can just look at it and go like, yeah, I understand this. That is my favorite part. And we actually were able to make this work and performant by keeping it so simple. So that's my favorite part. So I did pick a favorite child. Do you see this as supporting a persona who uses this alongside more advanced deck or separate UX report design focused persona? Andrew, that's a great question. I think in the end, we will see most users use Visual Calcs and then only use more advanced decks in measures where necessary. So I don't see it as a separate persona, but I do see this as part of like the report author a little bit, as well as what we like to call the young ashes or beginner ashes. Ash is a report author, right? That's the name of the persona that we use internally. The report author, the beginner that is coming from Excel, that's kind of the persona that we're targeting right now with this. From there, we can grow into the more advanced users, but right now we're solely focused on that simple use case for, well, not simple use case, it might be a very advanced use case, but for users that are relatively new or struggling with DAX, that's what we're trying to solve, right? I remember at the beginning I said DAX is hard, that's a blocker. We want to try to solve that. Can we share the info in this amazing meeting to public? Yes, of course you can, because I'm doing this publicly. So yes, you can. Otherwise, this would not have been recorded and this would be a private session somewhere. So yes, you can absolutely share this. We're even encouraged to do. Yes, we are. You are. And also, please mention that you learned in this meeting, and then we can have a little competition. Because I'll promise the one that gets the most views in 2 weeks gets a DAX sticker from me. Look at that.
Woohoo! That's great. Okay, so there is another question in the chat for moving average.
Is it that it will only consider the values in the visual? Yes. If we say cost is previous moving day average, will you get the cost visuals for the days not inside of the visual? No. So if you wanted to get stuff from outside of the visual that is not shown on your visual, you will have to use a window function. So that's on purpose. So these kind of things are so simple to use because we're very clear and made a couple of rough and big choices to make this very simple. So yes, we don't support everything under the sun, but that's also the beauty why I gave you the window functions to begin with, because now you understand that I can always expand into that to do more advanced scenarios. I remember visual calculations because you showed fat in the donut. Yes, I also am thinking about making a sticker about visual calcs that has something to do with a donut. If somebody is creative and wants to come up with a nice design that includes visual calcs and a donut, please send them my way. Thank you.
That donut means pie chart or not?
No. Donut is not a pie chart, man. Don't trip me. Cool. So,
Yep.
oh, somebody even says it's more interesting than anything Netflix has to offer. Well, that's great. We always like to be entertaining. Very cool. So I think Chris has raised his hand. I can take that one more question, and then I think I need to almost wrap up.
Yep.
Hi, Jeroen, can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Now, thank you for the great session. It was great to finally see it. I have a question that I think you guys are also working on a new language for the reports. Like for the tabular models, we have Timble, but there's also been work getting done on like a new language for version control friendly reporting. Will you see
Correct.
the visual calcs also inside that language?
Yes, because they're part of the report definition, so they will also show up in that language.
Oh, excellent. And then tools like PBI Explorer will then also be able to show the visual calcs as well.
I mean, what they do is up to them, right? But they will have that stuff in hand, so it's up to them then to support it. But it's part of the report definition file. So whatever happens with the report definition file, whatever new stuff we start doing with that in the future, it will be part of that because it is as much part of the report definition file as your visuals are and the placement of the visuals. Think about them as an integral part of the definition of the visual, right? The visual describes, I've got product on this axis, I've got color on that axis, I've got this in tooltips. Oh, and by the way, on tooltips, there's also a calculation. So it's a core part of that definition of that visual. So whatever we do with that in the future, it will all just come with that. So then it's up to the external tool to support it.
Cool. Thank you very much.
So,
no worries.
Jay, in that case, is there any limitation in terms of the naming of those visual calculation? Can we use the same name in different visuals? Or
yes, because there's scope to the visual.
Okay, but okay, yeah.
So there is a little bit of a risk there, right? Because you could see that you could write a visual calc called sales, have it in two visuals, and have one do the proper sales calculation and the other one doing a bad sales calculation, right? The user will not be able to tell because they can just look at sales and go like, oh, that's the same thing, right? They would have to go look at the definition.
Yeah.
To see.
The expression
so if you
of
are
that
a bad actor and you want to trip people on purpose, you now have more tools to do that with. I believe in the good of people. I believe most people are not out to trick their colleagues. But yes, of course, that could happen. But you could do that today already, right? With just adding a measure and just renaming it for that visual and call it sales. I mean, I don't think this problem is necessarily way bigger when it comes to visual calcs. I mean, today, if you have a proper sales measure and then a my sales measure that actually does the wrong thing, if you add those to a visual, you can still rename them call them sales and try to pass them off as the proper sales, right? You can still do that. I don't think the problem escalates too much with visual calcs on top.
Perfect. Okay, there are some other questions in the chat, but I think you cover that one.
Somebody's asking for stickers, so that's fine. If I come to SQL Bits, because guess what? I also have to wait until they accept my session. I'll for sure have some stickers with me, George. Also, if you don't catch me at SQL Bits, please come to the Microsoft Data and AI conference, which is in March in Las Vegas. I'll for sure be there. So we'll also talk about visual calcs there. So that's where you can get some stickers as well. Gopa, if I'm not mispronouncing your name, I'm sorry. to add the earlier doubt on moving average, can we combine the normal measure and visual calc together? For example, the rows, the days are missing. Can we use a measure? Yes, you can absolutely refer to a measure, bring the measure into the visual. So you will be able to use that. But I doubt for the specific case of a visual calc, for a moving average of things that are not in a visual, that you would need a visual calc for that, right? You can then just solve all that in the measure. So I don't think there's a lot of situations in which you need both, but I might be wrong. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Abe. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today.